I've been thinking about this, and I think the other day I was actually watching another podcast where there was this guy who said when AI came in, the promise was that I now will have to work less because AI will do my work. But since the time AI is in, I'm working more. because the entire day I'm just prompting and prompting because earlier I had these 10,000 ideas which I couldn't pursue, and now I have a chance to pursue. And then, to, as you said, to narrow it down, I'm talking on GPT, I'm talking on Claude, I'm talking on Kimi, everywhere. And all AI lie. So I have to be, like this principal at school that gets to the bottom of the lie, and sort of make it work. So from a governance standpoint, right? And especially from a pharma standpoint, for someone who's this aspiring founder, right? Trying to solve this problem for the global pharma. And I agree. You said the governance is human plus AI, right? It cannot be end to end AI. Understandable, right? From today's perspective, can you lay down how this process of data governance in a pharma looks like? And what do you think really has merit to be transformed through AI? And what piece do you think still needs to have a human? So what part human should own and what part can be tried with AI?
Yeah. So, before I answer your question directly, I think you hit on another really golden nugget, which is that one of the other big shifts that is happening for the governance and digital transformation and these AI centers of excellence is that before they had an opportunity to be choosy, and they would have to go to users and extract user requirements to figure out what was the problem to solve, right?
Yeah.
Internally or with an external solution. I feel like the list of the Excel spreadsheets of lists of projects to do that AI should now magically enable
Oh,
is huge.
uh,
And so we are spending a ton more time figuring out exactly which of the opportunities to pursue and doing tons of ROI calculations. So the scope and that ecosystem has gotten actually a lot busier, perhaps unnecessarily so. So I think that's
yeah.
one huge challenge. And then imagine being a brilliant founder, and now you're entering into this, alphabet soup of,
Mm,
opportunities that a company's
yeah.
already got, right? It gets really, really tricky. Um, I would say that from a governance perspective, I do see that most of the AI tools in pharma die in what we call a pilot purgatory. And
Yeah,
honestly,
yeah.
the reason for that is often not technical. Of course, there is the technical component of the data governance and the rules, but we have brilliant AI teams build great tools, sometimes actually in isolation without talking to the end user. And more specifically, if you build a solution, you have to build a solution that reduces friction. Otherwise, if you do not reduce friction, the adoption will be zero. So we can focus, and I can tell you a little bit about the data governance process, but I think there's
Well,
also that other component of getting
mm,
into get that scalability through adoption by solving real problems. So, the data governance piece, right? It
sure.
starts, I would say, at the very beginning. From a data governance lens, you have to think about what are the right data assets. And right now, those data assets may live in siloed systems, right? They live across the ecosystem. Sometimes it's internal data across siloed information collection places, because it could be Excels, it could be PDFs, right? It could be actual data pipelines. And then you also have the component of figuring out what are the priority things we need to do. If doing this project, because the data needs to serve a purpose, right? Otherwise, it's just dark data. You don't necessarily need to touch it. So there's this balance of figuring out what is the right data to bring in, right? And that's again also excludes external data. You oftentimes buy data or you buy solutions that generate insights that themselves become data points, right? That need to be embedded into the process. So, on the one hand, we try to think about data in terms of data domains. On the other hand, I often encourage people to really think about the problem we're solving and then think about the data needed to solve that problem. And how do we create a data product, which is a key responsibility of data governance, to create a data product that fits a single solution but fits other solutions. So get it 80% of the way there so that you can now say, every time a new challenge comes up, I have to adapt 20%, the last 20%, right? Maybe a few
No.
variables, maybe a few features for a particular model to be run or an algorithm. But I am 80% of the way there for 100% of the use cases we anticipate.
Okay.
And so that's a huge element of it. And then it's understanding sort of, what kind of data can be shared for what purposes, when, where, and why. I'll give you another great example and a story. When I first started up the data governance function in my previous role, I had some brilliant partners in technology because I was on the business side. I wasn't in the tech sector. And
Sure.
right as we talked about, that's that bridge you need to get AI into practice. So I was on the business. I had some great technology partners. My great technology partner said, "Hey, Victoria, you got to come check this out. Look what we built. In this catalog we have, anyone can go in, they can look up and they can find what clinical trials we have, and then they can push a button and they can download the clinical trial data."
Uh-huh.
I said, "Oh, no, no, over my dead body. That is not right." So they had a great solution, but without
Yeah.
understanding the implications that we have, informed consent forms and other documents and other rules around how you can and cannot use that data. And so, this is exactly, I would say, a lot of the examples of the tension. So it's one thing of getting the data in, and then it's another thing to figure out how to get the data out. And those are some of the examples of critical responsibilities and opportunities in that data governance and AI governance space as well.
Just from the, just to summarize. So, let's say if there's a problem that data governance solves it in 7 days today, do you think integrating AI will now help solve it in 5 days or one day? So I'm just trying to map the impact of AI on the data on the speed of data governance problems.
Yeah, it's a terrific question. Actually, I welcome the conversation around this. My critical focus has been around bringing AI to solve problems in other spaces. We've seen in data governance certain tools that help us, for example, identify data quality issues, so that we can more quickly
Got it.
figure out how to get back to users or have them, go specifically to see which um, data creator needs to change, because data governance, we don't change the source data. The creator has to update it. We have to have it go back through the pipeline. And so that's been an area where I've definitely seen analytics and advancing analytics help to more quickly, and there are solutions to that point. Um, will it help us build pipelines? Maybe some vibe coding would, but again, you got to have the human to know, which components of which code and whether it's Python or SQL or how do we move the Parquet files around, right? Those are questions that I think still at the moment are tricky. The context piece, I would say, is a huge opportunity. So being able to have that context and to have it learned context from other pieces of information. And I am very hopeful that as more organizations build up robust knowledge graphs, that should be a huge accelerator as well.
Hmm.
And maybe the other part would be the quantum piece of it, right? I think
Yeah.
depending on the technology we're using, I'm seeing some huge opportunities potentially coming through quantum computing and the
Mm.
ability to which also has multiple languages, and so then the ability to have a common language is one area where the more we're moving to certain common standards, the better off we'll be. And we've seen this, right? Historically, we've seen this, for example, with FDA, where, years ago, every pharma would send in their clinical trials in their own unique formats. And every unique format would then have to take a lot of time and effort to really dig in from the reviewers to understand what were the true scientific insights and risks.
Right.
As the regulators move to SDTM, CDIS format with Atom, data sets, there's an element of unique customization depending on the trial specifications, but there's a huge amount of standardization that has truly, I would say, accelerated and made everyone's world a little bit easier.